I was diagnosed at the age of 23. I worked before that. I worked for a time in the VAT department at Customs, which was processing VAT forms. So I could sit with my headphones on. This was obviously a long time ago, but I could sit with my headphones on and just keying numbers all day, which actually, thinking about it now, was my ideal job. I didn't have to talk to anybody, and the only pressure was that I had to make a certain amount of key depressions a day. Um, then I got a promotion and moved up to London, and everything kind of fell apart. I had to commute in on the train. I had to get a train at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was a 45-minute train journey into London, standing up most of the time, crammed in with everybody else. Um, and the only adaptations that I realized needed to make for myself, or knew that I needed at that time, was that I had headphones on. I'd have my music on so loud. I used to get complaints from people because they could hear it, but I had to cut out all of everything because I don't do touch. Um, I really struggle with touch. When someone touches me, it feels like burning. So to be surrounded so closely and jostled on a train where you're bunching into people all the time, and anyway, and then the tube trip round to Blackfriars where I worked, and basically by the time I got there, I was a mess. So I did that probably for about 9 months, and there wasn't even that maybe. And um, I'm going to use a phrase that people might not be common with, but I burnt out. And that's another big thing amongst autistic children and adults, is that we have varying degrees of burnout for our lives. Um, what I talked about with like the child on the school trip needing the day off, that was burnout. His reaction to that was burnout. It's you become so emotionally overwhelmed that you just can't cope. It's like having a kind of like a mental breakdown, sort of, so to that degree. It's a similar sort of thing. Um, so I burnt out of work, and I didn't tell anybody. I pretended to go to work for about 6 months, and put my suit on every morning. Went to the train station, walked down to the train station, and then walked around long enough until I knew that my mum and dad wouldn't be at home, and then I went back home again. Um, and that went, and basically I would crawl into bed and would be a gibbering wreck, and then about 10 minutes before they would come home, I'd pop my suit on and disappear out of the house again. So having that kind of level of that's how it differs from kind of a mental breakdown, because I still had a level of control over what I was doing. And you find during burnout that your autistic traits become more open, more strong. You become more autistic. You become more yourself. It's like the burning out removes the mask that you've put on yourself. So I did that, and then I was unemployed for a while, and then you had the it was actually a really good idea, wasn't it? That I'd love my nephews, always loved being around kids. So I volunteered for a short time to be a teaching assistant at the primary school that I'd actually gone to, which was quite an emotional experience because I'd hated being at school, and actually, it was a really good thing for me at the time because like I said about not knowing, like being so good at maths, but then crunching, I went to school as a teaching assistant and learnt maths again, and so I would sit at the back of the class and I'd be like, oh, actually that really makes sense, and so it kind of everything fell into place for me, and then I got diagnosed and went and told everybody, and my whole world fell apart. I was told that they didn't believe me. I was told that I was not autistic.
He was devastated. He loved the team he worked with,
and it was just nothing. And I explained to them the process that I went through when I went home. I'd come home at the end of the day and I'd fall asleep and wake up at 11 o'clock at night and go and have my dinner and then go back to bed again. And how exhausting I was and everything that was happening. And I didn't really understand my diagnosis at the time because there were no other diagnosed adults around me and no real internet at that point. And so, there was no community and I had no support and I was just left to deal with it by myself.
Didn't really get it.
You didn't get it at all, no? And it's, and everything was focused on children and even myself at that point didn't correlate that autistic kids grow up to be autistic adults. So anyway,
you moved up.
So I was very unhappy and left, moved up here and went to a different school. Did not disclose, and
agonised.
Yeah, I did. It took me to put it on the application form and took it off again, and And anyway, got the job as a teaching assistant again, and it's a lovely school. And I didn't tell them until one day I was sitting in some teacher training after school. There was a parent and one of the teachers giving training on autism, and I was sitting there and I was, that's not right, that's not right, that's not what happens, this doesn't work. And so I blurted out in the middle of the training that I was autistic, and I was told that I was lying, and had to take my diagnosis in the next day and photocopy it and blow it up to A3 and pin it on the wall. That's what I did. And then it was never really mentioned again, apart from the fact that the head teacher decided that, oh, you're autistic, you can work with all the autistic children. You know, so I was thrown into that, and so I was really unhappy there after that and left again. Went to work for Sure Start again, obviously because of that experience, didn't tell anyone. And then it got to the point where I was struggling with depression at that point, having some counselling, and could only have counselling during work time. So I told my line manager, and she was amazing, absolutely amazing, and her manager was amazing. And so I went through about 6 months where everything was absolutely wonderful, and it was the greatest job that I've ever been with, the nicest team.
3 days, wasn't it?
3 days a week. I worked 20 hours. It was the most supportive and lovely team. And then Durham County Council, in their wisdom, decided to mash up children and young people's services and get rid of Sure Start and create the 1 Point. Lots of people lost their jobs. I don't drive. I've got Meniere's disease and balance and hearing problems and stuff, so I get the bus. And I was told I was given a job in Peterlee,
Concert to Peterlee on the bus every day.
which would have taken me about 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours at night with changes of buses and traffic.
And there was a position. Kieran's position was staying in Stanley.
Yes.
And they gave it to someone else, and they wouldn't let him.
I was for 2 weeks. I was sat opposite my replacement and was told to tell them how to do my job.
And at that point, you push. Well, you know, it's really hard because I haven't filled out Quinn's disability living allowance form. So is he disabled? Is he not? We talk about positivity, but so then, you know, Kieran's gone to work and worked really hard, and then this is the point where you say, well, you know, I'm autistic. This is you know, disability rights. Let me stay here. The guy you give him my job has got a car. He can go anywhere. But we didn't have that confidence, and we didn't understand it. And
so at that point, I went into burnout again. Literally crumpled. Was hysterical for weeks, wasn't it? It's basically like, if you think about what a meltdown is and what shutdown is, and if you mash the two together and basically made it last for about 6 or 7 months, and then at the end of it I was a wreck, wasn't I, basically, and had to pull. And then obviously we were having a child in the middle of this, and Michelle had just started a business, and it was a hugely horrible and difficult time. But the positive side of it is that as I started coming out of what was a huge trauma, I had learnt so much about myself and had come to a lot of realizations that obviously a lot of other people had come to, because then when I started going online and found so many other autistic people and started to learn about neurodiversity and the paradigm around that and the belief systems around that, and a lot of what other people were saying were realizations that I'd come to. And so in a way, it was a hugely positive thing for me. But I had the experience to a degree of being diagnosed, and so many people go through that without a diagnosis. I know people that have gone through pretty much a replication of what I've gone through, and have tried to kill themselves at the end of it because they have not understood why they do what's happening to them. They have no control over themselves. You know, their brains are spinning like a carousel and fast forward, and this just drags on and on and on, and you don't know what's happening. And then you realize you're becoming more rigid in your routines, and you know, you have to start having control over everything, and you've got no control over any of this. And for an undiagnosed person to go through that, and then people wonder why we die early, it's, you know, it was horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And still at that point, you didn't really understand. I didn't understand much about myself. And it, again, after and during that period, towards the end of that period and afterwards, it was only as I started discovering other autistic people and talking to them and realising that I was not alone in this. And, you know, so for me, work has been a hugely mixed bag, positives and negatives. But people have asked me, should I disclose? And I always say to them, disclose on the application form. Because if someone takes that punt on you and is prepared to, they see that you are autistic, yet they are prepared to take you on in a job and give you the accommodations that you need, then that is the sort of person that you should be working for. And if you don't, even if you're desperate for a job and you put it on, I put it on the application, even if that means you're not going to get it. And I know I've been turned down for jobs for putting it on the application form.
But now we're both. It's got to the point where we're both self-employed, so we both work from home.
And I would never go back and work for anybody again. And I can't. And it's not even that I wouldn't choose to. I can't do that to myself again. It's my experience has been too traumatic. And that's not to say that other people. I know autistic people that have had fabulous careers and have found a niche that fits them. But I also know people that have done that and have got to the age of 40 or 50, and then all of a sudden something at their work has changed, or they've been given a promotion after years of doing the same thing, and their whole world falls apart. And it's, so that's where I know we're talking about work, but diagnosis is so important, or at least helping people to recognise and identify as who they are and accepting who they are and learning about themselves.
Now, both being self-employed, Kieran was a stay-at-home dad with 3 kids. As after Livy was born, I went back to work when Livy was 4 weeks old, which was hard. And Kieran's been a stay-at-home dad, and it's been amazing because they're so close to their dad. But obviously, I work pretty much from home as well, so there's that. It's good for Kieran. We're totally together, so we've got that support. And then there's also, there's a gazillion appointments when your child's going through diagnosis, and Quinn's pretty much we're nearly. We've got like a few appointments for his ADHD diagnosis, but we're just about to start again with Olivia. So always saying to a boss, can I have an appointment for this? They're always in school time, and can I have an appointment for that? And they're 2-hour appointments.
I mean, it must be such a struggle for parents that are in work.
There's that it works sort of, for us to have that flexibility. And then also we don't know what's coming next. So if Quinn was to go on a school trip and he needed a day off, well, we build that in, and one of us is about, and we can do that. So I think that,
and obviously that impacts on us financially, because neither of us are working full time. So there's we're stuck in the benefit system. We're reliant on tax credits, and we don't want to be in it. But in a way, it doesn't matter. We don't want expensive things. We don't want big things. We get what we need. And obviously, we have a hankering for nice things, but like everybody does. But it's what's more important to us. This is changing the focus a little bit because this is talking about our work. But what's more important to us is that our kids are loved, that they're happy, and they're in an environment where they feel safe enough to be who they are. And that's.
Because I could probably be at marketing director level now, in the corporate world, following my degree, earning a lot, but it would be leaving early, getting home late. I wouldn't be here for my kids, and I am here, and that's more important. And I do wonder if a lot of mums who step out of their careers for their maternity leave and then go back, and then they have a child going through diagnosis and get diagnosis, I think there'll be, a small army of mums with autistic kids who decide to go self-employed because it makes them more flexible. Some self-employed mums make, millions, but most of us probably have much more, realistic incomes. But like Kieran said, it balances against being there for our kids. And when Quinn goes up to secondary school, I think I'll just spend days just waiting. Is everything okay? But at least I'm here.
Well, there'll be a possibility that if, the environment might not be right for Quinn in secondary school, so he may need to be homeschooled, and then, we're here, that's an option for that, and, we'll struggle, but it's money at the end of it. As long as we can eat and have a roof, that's it. That's all that matters.
And I think you said a while ago about, sort of the really good positive things about autism, and one of those things is we spend a lot of time together, quite often in the house, but we really are together, and that's really precious. I mean, Kieran spent a lot of time together, and like when Kieran met me, when we met a long time ago, and he said I was the first person that had ever touched him and it hadn't burned, and it was like amazing. But we spend so much time together, but and we get on each other's nerves, no doubt. Especially as Kieran's like really started to know himself and become more autistic, but in that's good. But we just think we just feed and nourish and sustain each other. And I think if I wasn't about as much, then I would worry about Kieran, and we're together. And you know that's not built into any system anywhere. So we've just sort of created our own little work.
And I would say to any autistic person, you know, masking kills us. It hurts us. It every day it takes a little bit, sucks a little bit of life out of us. So, you know, regardless of where you work, don't be afraid to be yourself. If ask for accommodations, if your employer won't give them to you, that's an issue, and it's not an environment that you should be in. You shouldn't be fighting against your employers. You go and you do a good job. So, you know, asking for a little bit of help
and also
isn't
not
too much.
pigeonholing like autistic young people by saying, oh well, because you're autistic, you're going to like the repetitive jobs, and the you know, finding what they're good at and where they're comfortable. And
that's the thing. There are so many creative autistic people, so many, and you know, but they're not stuck in. They're not stuck in offices. They're not fit into boxes and you know,
scientists.
And we are such a varied people, and you know, so allow us to be ourselves. Encourage us to be ourselves and be the best that we can be.